All right, folks, welcome to the second edition of Inside the Titan Studios. I'm Malcolm, and joining me, one of the founders and creators of TWA, TWF, Damian. How you doing?
I'm doing really great. And I got to tell you, as much as I loved my creative non-kayfabe chat, I got to admit, your title is so much better than mine. Welcome to Inside the Titan Studios chat. I love it. It's awesome.
I gotta tell, yeah, it just rolls off the tongue. Like, yeah, Inside the Titan Studios. And our first episode, fun little behind the scenes in this behind the scenes show. Like me and Damien, we literally talked for what, 4 hours? Just it was 2 episodes, just talking back and forth. We thought, oh God, people are gonna hate this. This is way too long. Like,
and then we got people personally messaging us saying, guys, I have one major complaint about your video. While I was reading that text, I'm like, here it comes. We wouldn't shut up. And no, the complaint was we didn't talk about it long enough.
It was like, I feel like Wong in Endgame. You wanted more? It was like,
that if we keep embellishing and telling these stories, eventually we're going to run out of stuff to say, right? And they're like, no, you can't. Keep going. Keep going.
Like, okay, so you really want me and Damien to just keep talking? Okay, it's your funeral, but all right.
For two guys, if you watch us, and I know the audience is watching it, you watch us when we're got the microphone, so to speak, since we didn't have microphones, when we're focused 100% on the camera while shooting our promos, Malcolm and I can go forever.
It's a rare gift, and fun fact, I'm an introvert, but once I see the light, it's like, okay. You don't realize it's a gift till you see poor running man. And
yeah, I find the humor in it because one of my other really close friends, Infinity, did a great job of spoofing me. And the comment that he made, and I never realized I was doing this till I started watching, but he studied me very closely. In my promos, I tend to move around and I usually pace back and forth. And then he did a promo where it was me and he's like, yeah, exactly. And he's like, I'm gonna walk back and forth and just keep talking as if what I'm saying makes sense. Just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. He actually thought I was going to be mad when I watched that footage. I died laughing. It was so good. Malcolm and Infinity know me so well.
It's like, I'll tell you a little secret there. I think we've had conversations about the me and Infinity team. And I feel it came across talking to you that you're a fan of old school Infinity, who we'll get to, I'm sure, in a moment. But for me, I feel like me and Infinity becoming essentially the Edge and Christian of TWF. I thought that was like a rare, fantastic chemistry that just gelled. It was just so much fun dressing up as our opponents, just like mocking them, and we came off as douchebags, and it was great.
Well, see, this is one of the things that I really enjoy. Is usually Malcolm and I are on the same page, but with this topic, we're not. And it's cool because I agree that Mad Money, aka Infinity, and Big Time Malcolm Fine was a brilliant team. And it was brilliant because it became a comedy team, which Scream was kind of on his own doing that, and no one else was doing it. And they were brilliant. I mean, I died laughing watching them especially when they came out as Puerto Rican Freeze and wrestled Puerto Rican Freeze. I mean, that was bloody brilliant. But my thinking in terms of being a booker behind the scenes is we have two main eventers who are supposed to be at the highest level of respect and the highest level of, I'm trying to look for that fancy word, the caliber of the seriousness of these individuals supposed to be wicked high because they're main eventers and they're acting like mid-card retards. And it was brilliant. It was awesome. But again, not my vision for that. But
Yeah.
If it works, it works. Oh
Yeah. Like for me, like I see Infinity, and forgive me, I don't mean to disparage his performance in the past, but doing essentially an Undertaker impression. And that to me, that's not Infinity. Like when Infinity just became a doof, and the fact that to me it always worked, because here we were, we were those high caliber main eventers, yes, but here we're just like mocking everyone that is we consider below us. And what you saw there, that was Ben hiked up to 11, and for me that is the definitive Infinity for me. Well, like Damian said, we all have like different versions, and maybe there could have been a middle ground, who knows. But
well, it's really up to the wrestler. And I hope that at some point I will have Infinity on my Bad Backyard Wrestling show. He's agreed to at least make one appearance, and I'm sure in that episode he's going to let us know what the Infinitive one has been up to. And all I can say is we've already talked about some of the things that are going to happen. This show is going to be very different from most of Bad Backyard Wrestling, but I think it's going to be good, and I can't wait for you guys to see it. I'm happy to be filming it and working with people like Malcolm and Infinity. They're just incredible people, and I love working with my friends. And that's why I became a network marketer. I'm like, me and my friends should all get rich together, and then we can do whatever we want. So,
well, I'll be hoping that he brings a jar of Asso sauce when he comes up or to your show, but that's not here nor there. This is not an Infinity talk, believe it or not, folks. If you're watching this, it is at the end of TWA month here at the channel, where we saw the beginnings of TWA back before it came to Vermont, back before I was even a blip on the radar. It was Damian and a group of friends there. So I prepared this conversation here to sort of get people into what it was, what shaped it, and what have you. So let's get into it. So Damian, this is going to be kind of an interview with you here. So I just wanted to ask you, so to start off with, before wrestling, like you weren't always the diehard wrestling fan that you are now. You used to be a guy really into martial arts. So what was life like for you back then? What did you and your friends do for fun?
Well, typically, I had a very close-knit group of friends. We had, like Alan and the Wymans, all those guys were hanging out with us. We had Doug Elwood just down the road. Him and Dan became very close friends, and we all had martial arts training or gymnastics in common. Most of the people that I was hanging out with. And then in school, I met Infinity, and I met Terminator and some of these other guys, and we created a small niche group of friends, and we were training martial arts like all the time, or performing gymnastics either on my mom's porch, out in our yard, or over at the local park, Holton Park, showing off, which actually became the arena for Snow Brawl. So that's kind of funny.
So I remember when I first met you, and you would show me like all these videos from back in the day. Like I remember there was this one like you guys would do all these martial arts stunts and not really shows, just the stuff for to pass time. I remember there was like a martial arts do's and don'ts one you did there, which had like one of you like get into trouble, get into a martial arts stance. All right, let's go. And then the female friend you had just pulls out a Glock and shoots.
Fun with Martino Heat. That's right. Alan's fiance, who I just love to death. Jen is she's a gem. I just love her so much. And we were good friends, and it's funny. She ended up dating Alan, and it's funny to me because I knew her and Alan separately, but I didn't know that they knew each other. So it was kind of weird. But yeah, that was funny. Like, don't participate in a street fight was I think the lesson there, because good old Martino Heat gets into his Taekwondo stance and then he gets shot.
Now, I do ask this because the martial arts background, to say it plays a part in your wrestling in the future, is a gross understatement here. As you know, I'm watching you, you're doing stunts and katas, some of which I would see you portray with Anaconda in future matches across multiple feds. What drew you to martial arts? Like, what did you see in it that? Yes, Lucky, I agree too. It's an interesting subject. What about it drew you to it and made you as passionate as you were with it?
When I was very young, we had a small group of friends, and one of them was Miss White. I'm not going to reveal her first name. That I'm just going to keep that to myself. Miss White was obsessed with kung fu movies, martial arts, the Karate Kid, all of it. And I was obsessed with her. So we became fast friends, on the playgrounds, and I'm talking a very young age. I don't pretend to know how love works or what the ins and outs are and all that, but I remember being madly in love with this girl, even at the age I was at. And she got me into it. And because of it, I didn't realize this at the time, but my dad and his brother were both trained in karate really, really well. And my dad was a Navy guy, so he had a lot of martial arts experience. So when I became interested in Miss White, I also became interested in learning the martial arts because, one, it seemed like a smart thing to do because I felt like I was going to be the smaller kid. I didn't really have any groups of friends at that point. I was kind of introverted back then. I just wasn't very good at making friends. And because of the Navy, we had moved around several times. We were in Vermont, then we were in New York, then we were in Virginia. Then we're back to Vermont. So there was a lot going on, but I've trained various different styles. No, I didn't train all the time. Back then I did. And then I took a couple breaks. And then my dad and his brother trained me in karate, kind of like Danielson learned karate. I didn't learn it in a school. I learned it by doing stupid chores and things like that. But I got very good. Then we looked for a kung fu school. We found one. I trained at that school for a number of years. Then all of my friends in high school were all doing Taekwondo because Taekwondo was the big thing. So I made a lot of friends, and even guys that were bullies, I would fight them because my brother, Mongrel Martin, could be a tad bit crazy, and he used to piss a lot of people off because he just doesn't care. Which is cool. I envy that about him. I wish I didn't care what other people thought of me, but that's just my brother. But a lot of his enemies thought they could get back at him by bullying me, and I ended up, in a lot of cases, kicking their ass. And once you've kicked somebody's ass, they become your friend, and that's why. I vowed to Miss White that I was going to make it a part of my life, and I maintain that it still is.
I appreciate you sharing that. All right. But so out of curiosity, I say that like I don't know what the answer is, but who are some of your, were there any influences or martial artists that you watched growing up as a kid that you took after or took a liking to?
Well, I always took a like to Bruce Lee because he was unstoppable. But the thing with Bruce and Chuck Norris is they're in these fights, and I love watching them. And don't get me wrong, I'm not challenging the action these guys portray. I mean, these guys have created some of the greatest martial arts movies ever made, but they seem to dominate every situation they're in, no matter how many opponents they had. So my thing was always, if there were 14 guys attacking me, and if you've ever seen Jean-Claude Van Damme had a TV show that actually made fun of this. I forget what the the name of it is, but it's a good show. And this guy says to, like, the guys are getting ready to attack Jean-Claude. He goes, all right, everyone, attack him one at a time. We don't want to get confused and have our guys hitting each other. So go one at a time, which is what they do in these movies. And anyone who has seen a real fight or has participated in one, you got 4 guys jumping you. They're attacking you all at the same time. So I couldn't suspend my disbelief on that, which is how I came to find and fall in love with Jackie Chan. Jackie Chan's stunts I always thought were amazing. And the fact that when Jackie was in fights, he got hit. And he got hit a lot. Obviously, again, we can suspend our disbelief and realize that if you stop on a bandsaw and you stop, it's not going to stop just... It's like, everything that he does in these fights are in a absolutely perfect scenario, because when you watch the outtakes, that didn't actually happen that way. They had to do a cut and then did it again to make it work. But because of the realism of how people attack, I found his stuff a lot better. Plus, I really love making people laugh. I love comedy. It's a huge thing. And Jackie just kind of filled that void for me as a real hero of mine. And I love going over to the Chinese restaurant out here near where I live, about 30 to 40 minutes from here. The owner is best friends with Jackie Chan. There's pictures of him and Jackie all over the restaurant. So that's pretty cool.
Nice, nice. So you've got the martial arts background going for you. Are you friends who are into it and what have you? What introduced you into professional wrestling, and what led you to fall in love with the sport?
Oh, okay. That's pretty easy. I found that through watching WWF Superstars on Saturdays. I used to watch Hulk Hogan, Sergeant Slaughter, all these guys, and I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. I love watching it. I don't care if it's a male soap opera or not. I loved it. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. So that was where my obsession started. But back then, to me, it was like, it doesn't matter how I feel about this. This isn't something I can do because I'm a small guy. I've been picked on. I've always been small. My dad is small. My mom is small. I'm not going to be this 6 foot tall mammoth of a man with muscles. So there's no way I can do this. But that was until Alan called me and said, did you watch Monday Night Raw tonight? And I said, no, I didn't see it. He goes, you need to watch it. There's this kid called the Kid, and he beat Razor Ramon. And I watched it. I don't remember how I watched it. Maybe they've replayed it on a weekend show or whatever, but I saw it. And that's when my martial arts and wrestling kind of came together. And this convoluted belief in my brain said, I'm small, but this guy can do this, so can I. So thank you, 1, 2, 3 Kid, man. If it weren't for you, I never would have done any of this.
And so your friends were also into pro wrestling as well?
Yes, they were.
All right, excellent. So you were like sort of the last one to join the party, would you say, or?
Well, I wouldn't say it was the last one to join the party. I think we all kind of realized that there was a party going on, but it just wasn't, other than Alan and I. I mean, we knew Terminator and Bugman and all these guys. They all like to watch wrestling. But that was all it was. It wasn't something that we talked about every time we got together. I wouldn't say we were super fans. I know I was, but I would not say that I'm as much a fan as somebody like you, Malcolm, because I know and respect this, and I'm not taking away from anybody who does this, but I did not watch every single program that came out. Like, I wasn't watching Monday Night Raw. Well, that one I did watch. So I watched that one every Monday. I didn't watch SmackDowns. I caught them once in a while, and there were weekend shows too. I don't remember what those were called. So I wasn't watching everything, but I was watching pay-per-views and I was watching enough in between, but I wasn't watching it on a weekly basis in that sense. So maybe I was late to the party, or maybe we weren't aware there was a party. I'm not exactly sure on that.
So something I've always been, some of these questions, by the way, folks, have been softball questions. I know who his favorite wrestler was and whatnot, but hey, you may not. Out of curiosity, I know that 1-2-3 Kid was your favorite, but guys like 1-2-3 Kid back then were very few and far in between. Were there any other guys that you also liked, or did you find it kind of a struggle to seriously get into it at all?
No, absolutely not. I can name off the top of my head my 3 absolute favorite wrestlers before the Kid came on the scene. I don't want to take anything away from this guy, even though wildly proven online and throughout choices he's made. Hogan has become kind of a jerk or something. But I did like Hogan a lot. I liked Hulkamania. I thought that was all cool. I liked the idea of this immortal. But my 3 tops were Jake the Snake Roberts. And the reason I like Jake is he had this psychology with how he would get in the opponent's head and stuff. He was never really that great athletically in the ring or whatever, but he seemed very sinister. And I'll tell you, if he threw Damian, his snake, on me, I would run for the hills. Snakes terrify me. And I think that's how I found the Anaconda gimmick. I was like, what is the most terrifying thing I can think of? And I was like, snakes. Snakes are absolutely crazy. So I stay away from that. But Curt Hennig, in my opinion, Mr. Perfect, is the best wrestler that ever was. And then the last on that list, we have, I hate when I do this, I get gaps and things pop out of my head. So it's Jake the Snake Roberts, Curt Hennig, and then Bret the Hitman Hart would be the third, because that guy just, I don't know anyone who's a better worker than that man. I mean, he's just absolutely phenomenal. So, oh, and Shawn Michaels definitely on my go-to list because he made it possible for the small guys. So, but I would say Jake, Curt, and Bret were my top 3.
Listening to you talk about Jake the Snake, it reminds me of a running gag we had in TWF for a while, where we should have a guy who just comes out and he's Jake the Snake, and he's having the match, and then midway through the match he takes out the bag to throw out Damian. He unzips the bag, throws it in, and it's just you that comes out of there and rolls. And you're like, what the hell?
I remember discussing that, and I thought it was kind of strange, but yeah. Oh my God, I'm stupid. I'm sorry. I have to add a top 4. There is another wrestler that was my absolute favorite, and anyone who knows me knows who that is. It's Ravishing Rick Rude. Best heel ever was. And I used his finisher for years. So some people have said to me, isn't it funny? You spent most of your backyard and professional career using the Rude Awakening neckbreaker as your finish, renamed the Anaconda Strike, and your career ended by your neck getting broken.
Oh my God. I never thought of it like that, but
oh shit.
Oh man, I am so sorry. That is true.
Yeah, what is it? Destiny favors the stronger, or whatever that thing is. It was your destiny.
All right, so we've laid the groundwork now. You're a wrestling fan. You're into it now. You've got the martial arts background. You alluded to this in the when we were talking about the Mount Rushmore, but remind us again, what was it that one day all of a sudden caused you guys to start wrestling?
We went, my friend Terminator, his parents had recently got divorced, and his father had bought a house, and he moved, and it happens. I mean, it happens more readily today with social media and stuff. You reconnect with someone, you talk to them for 2 weeks or whatever, and then you stop talking. we were afraid that we weren't going to see Terminator anymore. So we all decided we were going to get Royal Rumble 95 and we watched it together. Here's this giant room. It's got a fireplace here in the corner. There's a TV. There's a door in between the TV and the fireplace that goes into, I guess, a Terminator's dad's office. And in the huge living room, there's a sectional couch that's like this. So we finish, we watch Shawn Michaels go over the rope and not touch, and then he comes back in and he wins the Royal Rumble, and we're all hyped up on, you know, testosterone because we're all young men in our teens and everything, and Terminator's like, oh, that was just a great, and everyone's raving about what the, you know, everyone's raving about how awesome this is and all this, and then Terminator goes, all right, we're going to wrestle. And we're, what? He goes, we can do this. We're going to create our own characters. I'm the Terminator. You guys create yours and let's have a rumble. And we're all hyped up. We're all like, you ever watch a kid, you take a really young kid like my son, you show him a kung fu movie. In the middle of it, he gets up and he starts throwing punches and kicks, and then he wants to tussle, and that's what happens when you're around guys, no matter what age you are. It's like you get sucked in. So we did it. And at the end of that Rumble, we got our champion. But at that time, it was just called WG or TWG, the wrestling group or something like that. And as we went on, this became a thing. We all thought it was fun. So we would get together and we'd wrestle in the snow. And this was happening like every weekend. And we just kept wrestling and wrestling. And it was kind of like a fight club, because eventually more people would be like, you'd be like, oh, hey, Donnie. Hey, Don. I was just hanging out with the guys and we went to, you know, such and such a place and we were wrestling. You were wrestling, guys? That's cool. I'd love to watch that. Why watch when you can come participate? And we were, and in the summers, we're wrestling all the time. Don't wrestle in the backyards. We were. Don't wrestle at parks. We were. Oh, you're going to fall and hurt yourself. Yep, we were doing that too. And we didn't care. We loved it. It was so much fun. So for 3 years, we were doing this, especially in summer when we were off school. We were doing it like daily, every weekend. And in the winter breaks, we would wrestle every day, because in the snow, we could do bigger stunts. It was safer. And we just kept wrestling. And eventually when my brother joined, which he didn't last very long, maybe 4 or 5 events tops, maybe 3, I don't remember. But he said, you guys should start filming this. People are going to want to see this. And we're like, we don't have access to a camera. And he's like, just borrow it from the school. Tell them you're working on a project and they'll let you borrow it. So that's how my brother made his stop motion movies. He would borrow the camera, tell him he's working on a project, and then he'd film stuff all over the weekend. So we started doing that. And 3 events later, we stopped filming and the whole thing fell apart.
So something I didn't want to ask you is, you know, bringing up family. My family, when they heard I got into wrestling, sadly was met with a lot of, oh, that's stupid. And, you know, a lot of people didn't really get it. So I'm very curious, like, how did you, when you started showing off that you were into pro wrestling, what was by and large the reaction from your family? And you've already touched on what it was when when you started actually wrestling and what have you. But I'm out of curiosity, what did they think about your new hobby?
They're like, my mom and my dad are straightforward, straight shooters. They don't beat around the bush. They're like, idiots. But they didn't tell us to stop. My mom said, you can do what you want, but if you send anyone to the hospital, I'm going to destroy you, was basically the message she gave me. And she's like, I don't want to see it. And that was her ruling. And my dad is like, he saw that I was into this. And my dad told me that now switch types of wrestling. Okay. We're talking about professional sports entertainment wrestling. My dad was very competitive in Greco-Roman wrestling. So what I didn't know is when my dad found out about this stuff, he would tell me stories of his wrestling federation, because my dad did the same thing in college, but it wasn't backyard wrestling. It was in-dorm wrestling, and it was Greco-Roman style. They had this list, and if you were at the top of the list, you were not safe 24 hours a day. One of these guys who were part of the roster would attack you, put you in figure fours, and da-da-da. And much like when I would tell stories of TWF to friends and unbelievable things that have happened to me, you always have that friend that's like, that's BS. I don't believe you. Where's your proof? I came at my dad with that same proof, and he took me into a photo album, and he pulled out a photo album, and he has pictures of the Gorilla Man got a figure four wrapped around some guy in the middle of the hallway while another guy's pulling his hair. And my dad became so much cooler in that moment. But he said he tried to stay in the mid card because he didn't want to be at the bottom, but he also didn't want to be attacked in the shower because somebody wanted to be champion. So kudos to my dad. My dad is so cool. But my parents' initial response when they found out I liked pro wrestling is, you're an idiot. So
I'm happy to see that he was ultimately kind of cool about it. I was kind of worried that it'd be like he thought that, oh, he's in the wrestling and I can teach him about freaking fireman's carries and waist drops and whatnot. And he's like, yeah, this is the moonsault, Dad. Like, oh, it's that. Oh, but hey, your dad's cool.
Well, he is cool, and I'll tell you this quick little anecdote, and then we'll stop the video because we only have 3 minutes left. Then we'll restart so we can keep the recording going. My dad actually taught me Scatman's finish, the Lady Maker.
No kidding.
So yeah, he actually taught me that. So I've been using that submission finish for as long as I've been doing backyard. And in Greco-Roman, that is not a move you want to be in. It hurts like hell. So I just thought I'd add that. So my dad taught me the Lady Maker. It's also known as the banana split. And I love all these people who come up with different pseudo names for stuff. I mean, we did it in TWA, TWF to avoid copyright because we weren't concerned with the copyright of music and stuff was added in it, but we didn't want to be stealing copyright things associated with trademarks on other wrestlers and things. So.
All right. Now, some of you people may hear some names and not be able to figure out what we're talking about here. Characters such as Bugman was mentioned, Terminator was mentioned, and you didn't see those guys in the episodes that we put up. So at this time, what was the roster like for TWG? Who was in?
I decided when I took on the project with the editing team here, and I decided to edit for the YouTube channel for Malcolm and for you guys, the audience, so you could see, and for the TWF roster so they could see. I threw in an Easter egg for everyone, and I believe it's in one of the winter events. I can't remember which one now, but when TWA closed down, we had 30 people on our roster, and I was able to find most of them on Facebook. So I put in an Easter egg that shows you, may not be the exact name, but it's the name that I remember. So some of the characters didn't wrestle as much because even when we did the UnFilmed Era, we'd have guys that would come in and do one event and then disappear, or 3 and then disappear, or people that weren't coming every time. So if you watch that video, I have a Easter egg inside the video where you get to see all of those characters. I mean, there there were the Wymans, like Wall Street Wyman and his older brother, Diesel Fuel. We had some really great guys, and we had a vast difference in ages, which is really ridiculous. We had people at 11 years old. We had people that were 19. I think my brother was 20. I mean, it's ridiculous. The ages were going up and down, and we only had one female performer, and she's hot as hell. I know, because I was dating her, but she kicked me to the curb eventually. So, it's funny because we had a group, and Plug, who lived down the just a couple houses down from me, was a really young kid. I think he was 12 when he started. But no offense, Plug, but you were fat. You were fat, and you used it to your advantage. His finish was the big splash. And if he could do it off the porch, he would. And most people that he hit it on lost oxygen, and that was it.
Hey, if that's using your body that to your advantage there. Like, it makes sense. Like, a splash from me, pretty effective. If done by different people, that were, let's just say, heavier set than me, a little more effective there.
Like, let's just say if you get a frog splash, a 7-star frog splash from Miz, it's going to hurt. But if you get a 7-star frog splash from Sammy Danger, your career is over.
Jesus, imagine if that was his finish. I'm gonna hit you with a 630. That's my finish.
Sexy Sammy D doing 450 splashes. I ain't selling that. Nope, not selling it.
Going back to an earlier thing, that first Royal Rumble you guys did after Royal Rumble 95, who won?
Bugman did.
Bugman. And Bugman...
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to say, if I recall, Bugman was champion for a long time after that, if I'm not mistaken.
Here's the thing. I was hoping this would come up in a question a little bit later on, but I want to cover it now because it seems relevant to this. Plus, I make sure that I answer this. When we started the wrestling group and we did TWA, we did not know anything about kayfabe. We did not know anything about predetermined matches. We did not know the magic of wrestling. The magic is the psychology, the communication, the teamwork, working with the audience, working with the cameras. All this stuff makes a safe, interesting match. And if you were going to beat Bugman, you had to beat Bugman, but he was the tallest, largest, and strongest of all of us. I was like the 1, 2, 3 kid in TWA when it started. Most of the guys, Terminator, Bugman, those guys were large. They're big dudes, much taller than me, stronger than me, So I had to be fancy. I had to use martial arts. I had to use my speed because, like I said, we didn't know. You go in the ring and your booker goes, all right, Anaconda versus Big Time Malcolm Fine. Big Time Malcolm Fine's going up on that. We didn't know any of that. And here's the funny thing. As I was going through it, I eventually said, hey, guys, some of this is so stupid to watch. You keep doing your martial arts because you don't want somebody to grab you. Try to keep them at a distance, but it's dumb. It looks stupid. So I started saying, all right, guys, let your opponent do some moves to you so it looks cooler.
Now, I was planning on getting into it, but let's jump headlong into it. Yeah, the elephant in the room. The Fed was, you guys were fighting for real at the time. You didn't know the men. Club
for sure. Absolutely.
How old would you say you were at about this time?
Let's see. I would say, hell, if I had a calculator, I could figure it out. So it was 95, right? So we're at 2023, right?
Correct.
minus. Okay, so that doesn't make any sense. I did something wrong there. Hold on.
Yeah. So while you're looking it up, I'll just tell a quick aside here, like, because my first Fed was we fought for real as well.
Okay.
And my finisher back then, because I loved Macho Man Randy Savage so much, was the flying elbow. Now, here's the problem if you're in a Fed where they fight for real. The elbow looks great and all that, and it's super cool to do, but no one's going to lay there if you're fighting for real and let you do the move. Maybe if they're smart, they'll lay there long enough for you to jump off and then move out of the way so you get hurt. But in order to do the flying elbow drop, I essentially had to beat them already. And so there was at a point where the elbow was more of a taunt than a finisher. So at the time that you were at the age you were at that time, which was 16, what were some of the bigger struggles you faced in a Fed where you fought for real? Like, you already kind of touched on it. Like, what did the matches look like in the very beginning of TWG as far as the matches go?
Well, I mean, if Pat the Bugman Riley gets a hold of you, he can body slam you, and his finisher is actually the solid slam. And it was over at that point because he's such a large dude. He called it the bug bomb, but he'd pick you up in a fall away and then just lay right in and crush you. So most of us who were smaller had to go for the submissions, the fancy moves, and me, I won a lot of my matches in the early going through quick, schoolboys and things where I purposely hold the tights and all that. But a lot of these matches were boring, a lot of punching, a lot of throwing people into walls, or, judo moves where you throw the guy down, and then the people that were afraid to get hurt would do the taekwondo kick and then back off, and then kick, then back off. But the bigger guys, they'd walk into those hits just to get a hold of you, and that's usually where it would end. But after a while of analyzing a lot of this stuff, I'm like, guys, this is so stupid. We gotta learn to let people do things, and then the quality of the show started improving. But it never occurred to me that if you predetermined an outcome, you can make a much better show.
Now, as far as like strikes, for instance, like, because you guys are martial artists, or a good chunk of you were at the very least, you know how to hit. Like, were you like, when you're taking on Infinity and you go for a punch, am I seeing like a legit Damian punch to the head? Are you going for it? Are you holding back?
No, due to Martino Heat, anything below the head in striking was allowed. Head striking was not. Martino has a tumor in his head. So like if you were watching Snow Brawl 99, Infinity says to me as Scatman, I just want to take this moment to remind you there's no headshots to this opponent. You don't want to kill anyone when you're wrestling. You want to put on a good show. You want to have a good match. You don't want to hurt anyone. You want to put on a good show. So that's where those kind of things came in. So the striking was mostly anywhere below the neck. But if I pile drive you, then I can hit your head. If I DDT you, and the Druid who used the DDT as his finish, use the DDT in such a manner. Like, have you ever played Virtua Fighter?
Yeah.
And what is Lau's daughter's name? Pi, is that what it is?
Yeah, Pi.
Okay, so Pi's in close attack is the DDT. And when she hooks it in, she wrenches it and then drives you in. That's how the Druid would DDT you. And I'll tell you, when your head hits the ground, when you're wrenched up, you're done. I do have to tell this one story. I don't remember the kid's name, but this has always shocked me because when people would come, we got, recruiting started happening. People would come in, more and more guys. So we'd start the interview process and be like, hey, Malcolm, what's your finisher? Well, we got this one tall, lanky kid, and he goes, I use the sleeper hold. And Infinity and I are like, the sleeper, what? He's like, yeah, the sleeper hold. We're like, that's what you do when you need to rest in a match. That's not a finish. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, he goes, I use the sleeper. And he got stern and angry. So we're like, okay. So gave him the deal that we give most guys, in which we were assholes. So we really were, because we're like, all right, you get one match. If you lose, you're done. You're out. If you cry, you're out. If you win and your match sucks, you're out. So those are pretty much the rules to get into TWA. Well, this guy is in the ring with one of the other guys, and they're just going back and forth, and eventually he grabs him. And I kid you not, Malcolm, he just goes like this. And the guy passes out and collapses onto the ground. And Infinity and I are looking at each other like, he said his finish was the sleeper. Do we pick the arm up? I'm like, and Infinity's like, no, the guy's out. He won.
Yeah, you learn really quick when you watch like MMA, for instance, versus like WWE, that there's a certain mystique that goes into it. Like the sleeper is called the rear naked choke. And if you put it on right, you're done. That's it. Just like with like an arm bar, you put on an arm bar in wrestling, and the guy will be in the arm bar for like 5 minutes, and it'll be like a little sore. You put on an arm bar in a real fight, you can snap the dude's arm like that. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Right. So you learn really quick there's magic in there. Now,
so we had a piece of the magic puzzle, but we didn't get all of the puzzle until Infinity and I went to watch the LSWF, and then we decided that TWA could come back, and then I wanted into what they were doing. I wanted to know why their matches looked so much better than the stuff we did when we were falling apart. And then I got to meet Grave Tavern, and Grave Tavern said to me, what the hell are you doing? I'm wrestling. He goes, you're not communicating anything. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Communicating? I'm like, I'm going to put you in this move. He goes, no, he goes, you tell me what you're doing, I can post so I'm lighter, and you can keep me safe when we're doing these stunts. And I was like, oh, interesting. I communicate. Oh. And then he showed me the collar elbow tie-up is where most wrestlers are communicating what they're going to do next. You can't see their faces because they're in each other's. He taught me so much. And I was like, if I had known this 3 years ago, what could TWA have been? Well, it would have been better, but not much better, because again, we weren't filming it yet. That's why we call it the UnFilmed Era.
So just to rewind there, I'll tell you like a fun story there. Or not really a fun story. Like when I was really into WWE or WWF back when I first started watching, I likewise also thought it was real for the longest time. And my family, especially my biological mom, would just ridicule me and just call it stupid and call it fake even. And I had no idea why. And I remember one day going to my video store, and there was a video there called Secrets of Wrestling, where they literally like reveal everything. You know, they're not actually hitting each other. Hey, when you see someone, that granny that was in the audience, it was actually a stunt granny that was planted there. The heel wasn't actually attacking her. When they get together, they do it like this. And I remember being so furious when I saw this video that I honestly didn't believe it was that that was telling the truth. Like, I thought this was some garbage planning by some dude who hated wrestling, and I refused to acknowledge it was real for the longest time, because in my head that was proving my mom was right about it, that it was fake, it was dumb. It took me a bit of time before I realized, they're still hurting each other. Like, even though it's predetermined, they're still putting their bodies on the line. It's still a fantastic spectacle. Well, there's no shame in them basically going out there and saying, okay, hit me, and taking it, so to speak. Now, when you found out it was fake, did you have any clashing feelings about it? Did you just accept it as, okay, this is how it's supposed to be, or were you disappointed at all?
Actually, I gotta tell you, I'm really glad you asked that question. That's a brilliant question. No, actually, I had an aha moment when I learned. It didn't change anything for me. I had no emotional response to it whatsoever. When Grave Tavern said to me, he's like, "This is how this is done," and I was like, "Well, duh." Like, how did I not figure that out on my own? I was almost there. Let them do stuff to you. It's more entertaining. Oh, no, you determine everything from the beginning. So that was great. And I don't mean to pick on Grave. I love him to death, and he taught me so much, and I have nothing but respect for that man. But Grave, there were other things you needed to teach me, like what is the heat? What is the shine? What are hope spots? What are these? Like, I could have, but as you pointed out, Malcolm, maybe he didn't teach us that because our heads were inflating so large that he's like, they're not going to listen to me anyway.
Like, you're only going to get so much in one training class,
But the point is, there is magic in wrestling, and as you guys will see in the upcoming Millennium Madness, we didn't know that magic yet. We weren't taught it. So you'll know when you're watching LSWF, people, because the matches are good. They look like wrestling matches. Then, other than me and Infinity, when you see TWA wrestlers wrestle, it's like a really crappy martial arts sparring fight. So you'll see. Stay tuned.
Now, while I was fighting in the KWL, which was the Fed I was in where we fought for real, like, in time, really quick, you realize there's only two types of matches you can do in a Fed like that. One, it's going to be a squash match, because it's going to be in there with some guy who's so overwhelmingly strong that he just overpowers the dude. And the match can really go as long as he wants it to be. Or two, it's going to be a Broadway, because you're going to have two guys that are pretty much at the same level, and they're just doing stuff for 30 minutes until the time limit draw goes off, and it's just a draw because they're too evenly matched. Like, in the beginning, because I do want to ask about the moment in time where you said, hey, maybe we should let each other hit each other. Were you finding that to be similar, or were matches differently for you, being with so many varying skill levels?
Well, with the varying skill levels, I mean, you'd see some shocking stuff, but now that I think of it, I think it would have made more sense for us to put time limits on the matches. We did not do that in TWA. We should have, because what you just described, this two guys that are equal and similar, just fighting back and forth, and then time runs out. That would have been a great way for us to end some of these matches. And some people would like, I can't tell you how many matches where one guy just said, yeah, I'm done. And then they would just leave the match. That's how it would end. Like, okay, you hit me with, like, I remember doing a hooking kick. And when I came around, my opponent grabbed my leg and then picked me up and then threw me into a tree. Yeah, it was over. And obviously at that point I couldn't do anything. So I think they finished me off with a Boston Crab or something like that. But there were so many matches where something would happen and the guy's like, no, Yeah, I'm done. I'm tapping. It's funny. I made a joke of it and in matches LSWF when I was Big King. I knew I was supposed to lose the match, but something had transpired and I could hear the commentators so well, I decided to run with it. And it reminded me of a TWA match because I just saw something I never want to see. I didn't see it in reality, but that was the way we were pushing it. It looked like I saw something I didn't want to see. I saw Lucky C's stuff. So I crawl away and then they're like, did he just tap out? And I'm like, yeah, I'll tap. And then I run away. Because that's how a lot of those matches ended. One guy would just run away from the other one and leave. And then we'd stop. And really, it would be like Fight Club where you're just, I'm good. It's over. And I'm good. I would say at least 80 to 85% of all TWA matches ended that way. And I always thought it was stupid because there was no pin, there was no submission or anything like that. So then that's when I decided, hey guys, we need to start letting people do stuff to make it look cooler. So.
Now going back to what you said, like you eventually came to the conclusion you're in, while not even realizing on your way to eventually making things predetermined. But you brought up the idea of, hey, maybe we should allow each other to hit some moves and whatnot. So I have to ask, like, I can imagine someone like Diesel or Bugman, and you're telling him, hey, maybe I should hit you a little bit more. You should let me hit you a little bit more. That I could see them giving you the finger and like, yeah, I bet you would. Like, was there any pushback whatsoever to the idea of let me hit some moves so the match will be better?
I would love to say that were the case, but it wasn't because all of those guys were gone before we had that realization. It was at the end when we were filming the last event, which is Snow Brawl, the Whiteout, which I had when I went to college. Snow Brawl, the Whiteout, I don't remember any of the matches. I know my girlfriend had a match, and I think the Scrub had a match on that. Twilight had a match. I think there was 3 or 4 matches, but the main event was the Two Faces of Fear. And when we came back in Rebirth, the Two Faces of Fear were actually Anaconda and Infinity. But the original Two Faces of Fear was Scatman and Infinity. And we were wrestling who had, I don't know what his name was at the time. I can't remember. It was before he was the Phantom, but it was him and Plug, and they were the two swords. I think they were like the Scimitar and the Rapier or something like that. 2 sword names. And they were the champions. And here's the funniest part about that. I have no idea how they got the championship titles. I don't remember. Maybe someday Phantom will come on or comment on one of these videos and let us know how him and Plug won the tag titles, because I don't recall who was champions before them. But I pile drive Plug in that match. And you can hear there's ice in the snow, and you can hear it crack as I pile drive him through it. And then he stands up and he's gasping for air, and he grabs my girlfriend, and then he's, when people get hurt, they jump up, they're trying to breathe, and they make that sound. So he did that, and then he grabbed me, and Infinity's like, So I schoolboyed him. We got the pin, and boom, we were Gemini champions. And that's who we were when we went into Rebirth. But what I didn't know is I come home from a late class. I think it was astronomy, because astronomy ran from 6 to 8:30 on a Thursday night. Miserable class. It was awful. 2.5 hours listening to this guy talk would put anyone like you'd be able to sleep forever because he was so boring. But anyway, I get back, and I kid you not, there were 30 people in my dorm room. No alcohol. 30 people all on the couch. I walk in the door and everyone starts clapping and they're cheering and I have no idea what's going on. I turn around and my roommate, Eric McLaughlin, who is like a telecaster now, he films stuff for ESPN and stuff like that now. He's watching Snow Brawl Whiteout, and we called it Snow Brawl Whiteout because somebody filmed it on the indoor function and it was out in the snow, so everything's insanely green and white. But they're watching Plug get pile drived and everyone started calling it the Doug driver. And they just kept watching it and rewinding it and watching it and rewinding it and watching it and rewinding it. Now, I'm not going to say that Eric took the tape. I wouldn't do that. But with how much he liked it, I wouldn't have put it past him to do so. But my mom was also notorious for taping over my stuff with her show Guiding Light and Young and the Restless and stuff like that. But that's my own fault for not keeping my VHS tapes in my room or whatever. But that video, that event, we had to talk about letting people do moves to before we filmed that event. So at that point, Terminator, Bugman Riley, those guys were all gone at that point. They had moved on. So
let's talk about that.
Had that revelation because we didn't come to that until after they were gone.
So let's talk about that. It sounded like you started with 30 members strong, which would have been insane for TWF in like the time I lived there. What led a lot of people to just stop showing up? Did they just stop getting in? Were they not into wrestling anymore? They grew up, or what happened?
I assume that someday I'm going to be, walking around a corner somewhere when I'm visiting St. Albans, Vermont, and I'm going to walk around a corner and they're all going to be stuffed somewhere in a closet. But the problem with a Fight Club mentality to professional wrestling back in the day is that no one needed to communicate anything with you. They just stopped showing up. And calling wasn't a thing back then, because if we're at Holton Park with the camera and you have 30 guys that you depend on to show up and you're ready to film, or you just go to Holton Park and everyone's supposed to be there at 9 a.m. and this is before it was filmed, and at 9 a.m. only 16 of the guys show up, you can't call them. You just work the card with whoever arrives, just like you and I did when we were making the show for public access. And it was the same thing when I would do Slam All-Star Wrestling in Vermont. I would create these posters, and my trainers and my teachers, Northern Stud and the Bull, told me, you have to have a disclaimer on there that says at any point this card could change. And I said, why do we need to do that? And he goes, because people are going to not show up and they're not going to explain why they don't show up. So you need to be able to change your card in accordance with who shows up. So I don't have the details. Some people would be pissed because they didn't get title shots. Some people would be pissed because they lost a match and felt ashamed because they thought they would beat so-and-so. And sometimes they just didn't want to get beat up. I don't know. I couldn't tell you what those people were thinking, but that's just where we're at, I guess.
All right. I'm going to break your mom's heart now. So we've talked about how real it was. Like in Snow Brawl, when Infinity tombstones you into the ground, you are getting tombstone head first into the ground.
That is correct.
And
just like when I drop kicked him off of the porch, he got drop kicked off the porch.
Yeah. And when Infinity took on the Phantom and he locks in that spinning leg lock, and you guys would see the Phantom tap out or the ring bell suddenly go off. What you probably didn't hear was poor Phantom him crying because his leg hurt. So
Yeah.
so I gotta ask, are there any, and we talked about the Doug driver as well. So I gotta ask, were there any injuries that stand out here? We back then, keep in mind, we didn't know concussions were a thing, and a lot of these, it sounds like one of you may have had one afterwards, but are there any like major injuries that stand out to you even after so long?
Well, I honestly, I don't think there are many, and I'm really proud of that. And the reason is because everyone knew while we were doing this that if you were done and you just wanted to stop, you could just wave your hand and I'm done. It's over. And that's, like I said, I would say at least 85% of matches ended that way. I remember one event we found at Holton Park. It was a snow brawl. I don't know when it happened. Obviously, it was during the winter months, but Scrub was taking on a new kid. I don't remember the kid's name to this day, but we had pulled out this pole because they had built like horseshoe pits and stuff nearby, and they had a couple of flagpoles sticking up. Somebody had pulled the flagpole out of the ground. So before we started that event, we thought it'd be cool if we had this pole up to this large tree because we could jump out of the tree for high risk moves.
Mm.
It's a brilliant concept, but like you said in KWL, I'm not going to sit here while you jump on me. That's not happening. This is real. So I don't remember what transpired, but the Scrub got hit with a move, and he was clearly taking a page out of Bret Hart's book. He falls and starts playing possum, pretending like he's really hurt. So the kid climbs up this flagpole and gets into the tree. At that point, Scrub, who is a fourth degree black belt in Taekwondo, kips up and does a spinning back kick and knocks the pole down, and then looks at the kid and sits on our original top rope, which is a picnic table made of cement. And he goes, "What are you going to do now, kid?" And the kid is struggling, Malcolm. Struggling to climb. There's nothing to climb on this tree. The only way you could get into it was climbing this pole. It's in winter. So the kid tries to climb down, falls out of the tree, falls right on his back, knocks the wind out of himself, and Scrub pins him and gets the win. Awful. But hilarious at the same But no, I honestly don't remember. I mean, we had bruises, things like that. Maybe we had a concussion. We didn't know that was a thing. So maybe, but other than that, we really didn't have any serious injuries that I can recall. No one ever had to go to the hospital, but people would they would scream in pain when they were in the figure four for real, when they were in the Boston Crab for real. You would scream and tap. So people were getting hurt, but no one was getting seriously hurt. So,
all this talk about Fight Club, it really makes me understand that what Tyler Durden had was arguably the greatest backyard wrestling fed of all time, now that I think about it. And probably something that we should all aspire to be. We kind of have something similar with Tyler Durden, I'd like to think. Which brings us to one of my favorite subjects here. Organization, how the organization worked here. Now, little behind the scenes with TWF, our proper fed there. Essentially, we did a show every month. We got together maybe once a week, if possible, for training classes where we'd practice taking bombs. Or if you had a move that you wanted to incorporate into your repertoire, we'd come in, we'd help you practice and get the kinks out of it. You'd come over to our apartment where we would discuss angles. You could meet up with your opponent there and work out the match if you wanted to. But in general, we had like one major show every month. With TWG, which I'm going to start calling from now on.
TWG, the wrestling group.
Now, I imagine it was just like a fun activity you guys would do. So did it happen more frequently? Would there be like times where there'd be only like 5 of you there and you're like, hey, let's have a TWG show?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would like to tell a little white lie and say it was like my dad's thing that he had going on with his college, that you were never safe. It could happen anywhere, anywhen. But that's just not true. We did not have like when you guys came in and we did Rebirth, you guys were like, oh, this is Gangbanger 7 or 6 or whatever it was. And again, I can't recall how many there were, because I used to think it was 6 years, but clearly that was a Mandela effect. And the reason I thought it was 6 years was because I remember wrestling so often, but that's because my brain had been programmed to think that we were wrestling once a month, but we weren't. Back in the UnFilmed era, we were wrestling anytime we got together. So there were mini events or major events. Some events 4 people would go to, some events 30 people would go to, some events be 10 people. And sometimes it was, hey, Damian, I've had a real crappy day. My parents are whatever, and I just want to get away from it all. And I'd like to get those emotions out. So, I want to go over to the park and just, wrestle. And we did a lot of that too. So I would say in the UnFilmed era, there was no event schedule, but we had so many. Like you'll hear Nuke Ultima say he was undefeated for 300 matches. Now that you'll see in an upcoming video at the end in the SWS how Havoc makes fun. He goes, how in the hell are you getting these numbers? Like, what do you have, a calculator or something? The reality is that figure is correct. But you say to yourself, 300 matches, that's like, there's no way if you're only doing an event a month, but that's not correct. Like if you're wrestling with us, you could wrestle 8 times in the same day, for crying out loud. It's just what you want to do, who you want to work with. And, a lot of times it'd be like, I've been working on this move, but Malcolm is the only one I can actually do it with because, we've been training together. So let's do it. And then I'd be told by Infinity, okay, so you are going to be wrestling Plug and you're going to be wrestling Terminator. And then I'd be like, yeah, but I got something going on with Malcolm. I'd like to, we're like, okay, we'll do that later on. So that's really how it's going.
Yeah, it can add up, folks. Like, you probably are putting 2 together. They're just watching the 3 events that we still had. Like a commonality, it's rare that there was a match that took place without Damian in it. Yeah. So I can believe that you got that. Eventually, you reached up to that number. Like my total match. Like if you're just looking not at big time, but like how many times I'm in the ring, it's probably like over the course of my career with TWF, it's probably a pretty surprisingly big number. Like if you're just going by total matches, Malcolm Spinetti was in.
And keep in mind, guys, he wasn't there till the end. I mean, he came back for the end, but he had moved to Maine for a while, and his numbers are still very high.
All right. It was fun wrestling me. I can safely say that with no ego. But moving on here. So we, like in the beginning, I think we only knew about Gangbangers and maybe one other show, but it sounds like you're starting to remember more of the event names you've had. Out in the Cold, Snow Day, or what have you. Do you remember any other names over the show?
Most of the time there wasn't a show name because we weren't doing it in shows. But when we started filming stuff, that was another thing that Mongrel Martin told me. Is like, you should treat this like pay-per-view. Have an event name for each. I mean, our WrestleMania was Snow Brawl. That's the only one that stood the test of time. I don't know who came up with Gangbangers, but that was our spoof of Survivor Series. And the rest
this was before that was a term for something, by the way, folks, just to throw that out there.
Yeah, exactly. We're not proud of that name now, but when we invented it, we weren't I mean, I'm not going to say we weren't sexually active or anything like that, but we weren't thinking on that like at all. And cancel culture didn't exist. So we apologize for the name, but that's what we called it. So I don't really know. We had all kinds of shows. Sometimes we'd come up with a name of something we thought was interesting and use that name, but we tried not to use a lot of the same names. But of all the stuff from the UnFilmed Era, I can tell you that Snow Brawl always took place in January. Gangbangers, I think, was February maybe, and then Royalty of the Ring and Haunted Happenings were always in October and November. But other than that, honestly, I couldn't tell you. I know that another thing we really like to do is we go over to the Druid's house because he owned the basement, and his mom was hilarious. She would come and just watch the show. And that's where we would do all the dark rumbles. And the dark rumbles were funny because the ref has to count by turning the lights on and doing the count. But as a wrestler, you are also allowed to turn on the light for a count of 5 so you can see where the people you want to attack are. Well, I remember to the day I'll die is I'm getting ready to do an acro circus. It's an acro circus, people. Stop. Everyone who commentates doesn't know what the Damian Martin acro circus is. If you do a front flip at an opponent, you intend to hit them with your body, it's an acro circus. So I'm ready to do an acro circus, and one of the guys turns the light on my target. I could hear him babbling. Thought was in front of me. So I jump just as the light comes on. He's standing way over there. I land on the hard cement floor. That was Acro Circus gone wrong. So I don't remember a lot of the titles, but all I do remember is that I thought it was 6 years because of how frequently we wrestled, but that's because to us it was an every weekend or every day in the summer, every day in winter break. So I was hanging out with my friends all the time, and we liked beating on each other. What can I tell you? And we were never malicious, except for when we were trying to get the win. It was fun and games, having a good time, selling and doing some moves. But when it was, I'm going to win, then you got real. And in the moments when you were going for the win, that's when it became dangerous. But again, I'm proud of not any serious injuries.
So a lot of the reason I consider you one of the face of TWA, TWF is you were essentially the heartbeat for it. You're the mastermind. You kept the show going, even when it seemed like you were at the end, potentially with Rebirth going on. I do want to ask you, did you who ran TWF? Was there anyone? Was it just like, hey, you guys want to do a show when you guys happen to be together? Or over time, did you find yourself spearheading a lot of the shows and planning them out?
TWA or TWF? Or
TWG, excuse me.
TWG. All right. The wrestling group. Not really.
Okay.
I would say at that time, the Terminator was very, very much involved. But I would say after he left, because TWG was created because Terminator wanted us to do something cool. And we kept that going for a while. But when he started going to school, it happens. He made new friends. He moved on. He stopped answering the phone. He stopped reaching out. And at that time, I took the bull by the horns, and I kept the thing growing, and I got a job at Burger King, and that's how I kept the whole thing going. I was like, I had a job, and I want to hang out with my friends. Not any of them had jobs, which is kind of, well, Bugman did. Bugman was working at Dunkin' Donuts, and, most of the other guys weren't working yet. So we would coordinate, because once we had jobs, it became harder to get everyone involved. But when my brother stepped in, it's like, you guys should be filming this. I always see that as a tipping point, because it occurs to me that I wished we had done it from the beginning. But we didn't have access to a camera. None of us are rich. So there's nothing we can really do about it. And at that time, people were graduating high school. People were ready to move on to go to college or start careers or move jobs or move away. And the whole thing just kind of spiraled out of control. And if you're the leader of something and you're trying to build something, and you're forced into a position of power by somebody leaving, you didn't earn it, it becomes this herding cats thing. You're trying to keep everyone engaged, trying to keep everybody happy, trying to keep everything going, but people just weren't interested. They were moving on to other things, and I kept the three individuals doing stuff because we loved wrestling, and that was Infinity, Phantom, and myself. And we call that the defunct period, where it was essentially a year and a half, although in videos in the past and interviews I've done and people have asked me, and in chats like this, I've told people it was 3 years, or Infinity was the champion for 4 years or whatever it was. It was actually only a year and a half. But again, when it's in the past, 20 years ago, you seem to forget a lot of things. It's not as clear. But the simple fact is, we did the best we could to keep stuff going. And then, since we had a couple videos like the ones you're seeing now, Snowbrawl 99 out in the cold, we were able to entice Martino Heat, and he came in. And then we got Scorpion, who, for whatever reason, decided to start calling himself Poop Shoot. So even though in Millennium Madness he was actually Scorpion at that event, I used the Poop Shoot graphic because he will always be Poop Shoot to anyone. And Poop Shoot, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. I hope your head injuries are getting better, because I know Starscream ended your career with a chair shot.
And Poop Shoot, if you're watching this, please comment below on and explain why you accepted the name Poop Shoot. Like, I can understand it as a nickname, but your wrestling name, come on, man, come on.
Yeah.
So you touched on this a little bit here, and it's funny that even when the Fed's career, the Fed was real, or actually are going into combat, that you faced a lot of the same problems we had when we were running the Fed. And you were talking about how there were, like, it's not like two, aside from yourself, two others that you could really count on to show up. This is nothing new from when we ran the Fed. People have lives. Sometimes availability is tough. I feel like during the golden era, as we call it, when just before I left, we had a good number of people where I feel like we could count on that was going to show up. We knew Kyle was going to show up. I feel we knew Matt was going to show up because it's his house. But
well, that's the really interesting thing about TWF in comparison to TWA. TWF built people we could count on. We built brands. We built names. We have UFO, we had the Grizzly, we had Kingpin, Black Ice, Cross. We had Grave Tavern, for crying out loud. We had Big Time Malcolm Fine. We had Ivana Humpala. We had some of the most incredible talent ever. And these people, no offense to the UnFilmed Era, and I don't want to make light of any of that, because that was some of the best time of my life. But the reality is, TWA never achieved what TWF did. We never got to where we had a roster that we could count on and build storylines with and all that. And that was the most frustrating part, because in the end, wrestling is just storytelling. And I had dreams of telling great stories. But when you develop a roster, you need that roster to show up. Otherwise, you can't move a story. Well, if not a single person on your roster out of 30 people is dependable, except for 3 or 4 of you, you do the math.
Mm.
And I'm so proud of you. And I'm proud of all the members of TWF that stuck with us and that stuck with it, especially the ones who don't give a rip about wrestling. I love you guys. And you guys helped me achieve something as a leader that I just couldn't achieve in TWA, which is why when Infinity said to me, we can bring TWA back, I was like, no, I was against it. But I'm so thankful that he wouldn't take no for an answer.
That was actually going to be my question. It sounded like you guys were essentially down to a skeleton crew. So it was Infinity that pushed you to do Rebirth then, it sounds like.
Yeah, we went. I was walking the college campus, and I just happened to be going through the near where the theater is. And I'm going through there. There's this long hallway from the computer lab all the way to where the theater is located. And I'm looking and I see this poster up on the wall. It says LSWF, Linden State Slaughter, blah, 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 and whatever the date was. And I'm like, what the hell is that? And it said wrestling. And I was like, wrestling. Okay. So I called Infinity up. I said, you gotta come up and visit. And he said, why? I said, the college is doing a wrestling show. I think you and I would really like watching that. So we did. And it didn't take but one match for us to figure out what they were doing. They were TWA. Now, I don't mean that to put a negative disclaimer on, or a negative name on them, because they were better than us, because they had a pro wrestler teaching them the magic. We did not. But when I was watching it, I knew exactly what I was watching. I'm like, this is what I wanted to do with TWA. But when I finally wanted to do that, because I stepped into the leadership role because I was forced there. It wasn't something I chose. It's something I had to do or it was over. And I was negative about it because in my leadership, it ended anyway. But Infinity said to me, we got to know what these guys know and we can do this. And I was like, you're out of your damn mind. This thing's over. It's been over for 3 years or a year and a half or whatever the time period was. I'm like, it's not in me to do this again because I don't want it to be something that I pour my heart and soul into and I put all this effort in and then it just falls apart again. I can't have that. And he's like, it's going to be different this time. We'll do it together. That was different.
Speaking of different, and now I'm honestly curious, from the moment you make this decision to do it together with Ben, to how long after that did you and I meet for the first time?
I literally think it was the following weekend, if I'm being honest.
Get out of here.
Yeah. I mean, I don't recall the dates, and I know you don't either, but when Ben and I had that little, thing and we got to talking and we saw the LSWF show, I think I was already living above Lindenville Video at the time. So I was doing the RPG thing with Jen and Dave and Grizzly and it just, you were going to have your date and hang out and I was going to meet you guys and you were irritating as fuck. So I really wasn't interested in meeting you, but Jen was, and I don't think I realized how important that relationship was to me until like years later, but I was very protective of her, even though I wasn't interested in dating her or anything, but I was very protective of Jen. So that's what led me to the decision, although I hate this guy, I'm going to let him stay with me so they can have this thing and I can kind of keep an eye on him to make sure he's not pond scum. And then he identified the abdominal stretch, and I knew he was the coolest guy in the world. So it all worked out.
Yeah, little peek behind the scenes as far as how me and Damian met. It's honestly all thanks to Ranma One Half and Batman Beyond. Essentially, I was in the process of watching Ranma, which my little brother at the time had seasons 1 through 2, and I thought, okay, this is an interesting show. And then I watched Batman Beyond, which the premise it was focused on the next generation that comes after Batman's time period, and that which was the first time I was introduced to their concept of a next generation of a fandom. So I thought, and Ranma is literally all a show about people trying to marry Ranma, but it's also like you also have these potential couples in between that made so much sense. So from Batman, I was thinking, okay, what would couples of these characters grow up to be like? And I have like the composition book in my home somewhere, but I literally just sat down and I created all of these characters that were children of those characters, and what it would be like when they eventually all got to high school and met for the first time. That's where my character Kantoro Hibiki was born, son of Ukyo and Ryoga, best couple, even if Damien correctly points out that they don't actually get together in the manga. In the anime, it's different. Heck with it. And I wrote this gigantic fan fiction back when that was I'm sure it still is popular, but I wrote a huge fan fiction about it that was like quite a few different pages. I think I called it Ranma Beyond, and it was supposed to be this multi-chapter deal, but I only got as far as one chapter. And I posted it online, and I got the idea, I wonder if anybody else came to the same idea. This is like the infancy of the internet, by the way. I think it might still be up fanfiction.net if anyone's industrious. And I came to a story called Children's of Narima, which wasn't as long as the epic novel I wrote, but I still thought it was good. So I emailed the creators of it, which were Randy and Jen. And from that interaction, me and Jen especially started really interacting and talking well with each other, which led to a potential dating situation, which is how me and Damian met. We did a role play online, as I recall, and he didn't like how I was doing it. Now, in my defense, I'd never done anything like that at the time. So I didn't know the rules and protocols that you're supposed to follow. And so it's like, okay, screw this. And
meta gaming mother.
So yeah, so we got off to a bad start there. We actually had it out, and Jen was like, hey, and we had made the decision to meet. Damian, as he said, I was going to be staying at his house or apartment, I should say. And you are right. You lived over a video store, which made it the greatest apartment in the history of
anime. Yeah, absolutely.
You just go downstairs and there's a barbershop and the video store right there. It was like everything you need. And there was like literally White's Market, which was the supermarket there. That was just
right
like
around the corner.
Like everything you needed was in walking distance, which for me, who can't legally drive, this was like beauty. And so I come over there, and we're still apprehensive against each other. You show me TWG, which we'll finish up on in a second. And I start calling moves, and you're like, oh my God, yes, that's what it is. So at what point did you get the idea of booking me on the show, out of curiosity?
Well, we had just done Rebirth, and after we watched that video, I'm not sure you recall this, but you told me about KWL. And I knew we were going to need talent, so I was like, I'm not going to do a show with Ben and Dan and Marty and Poop Shoot. I'm like, I need to bring it up. There needs to be something else going on here. And I was like, you guys were there. You're in my home. You've told me you're interested in wrestling. So I'm going to suck you in. And Starscream was dating or was attempting to date one of Jen's friends, and he was trying to impress her. So he figured Starscream would be a good deal. So in a way, you guys' needing relationships really helped my building of TWA.
So going back to TWG, I feel like it shouldn't have taken me this long to ask, but what led to the name TWA?
The creation of the belt. When Infinity became the champion, I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was before Scatman's reign. He may not have been Infinity. It may have been the Heartbreak Kids still at the time. But we decided we needed a belt, and at that time there were no, you couldn't go to Ames department stores and buy a replica for $20, which if you didn't know is what we use for TWA, TWF, which is fine. And then Malcolm and Infinity had to like make everyone look like chump change by bringing in real titles. Jerks. But I appreciate that they did that. That was actually quite great. But anyway, we needed something, and Infinity had a back brace. So we decided that it should be a title. And then I was like, this thing is got to have an official name. We can't call it Wrestling Group WG. And we started mulling over names, and we didn't want to use Federation. We wanted something else because I don't remember why. We just didn't want Federation in the title. So I always thought when I fell in love with wrestling that wrestling was done by Titans, because I would never be big enough to do that. So Infinity and I kicked around this idea of Titan Wrestling, and I was like, we can't call it Federation. It's got to be something else. And I said, Association. He goes, works for me. We created the duct tape TWA Legacy title out of duct tape back brace, and that became the title.
All right, so we're coming towards the end here. So, any parting thoughts on your time with TWG or TWA before it became the era that I joined? And just is there any regrets you have about that time?
No, I don't have any regrets.
I don't mean that in a sense of, oh, I should.
No, hold on. I think I know where you're going with that. Like, one of the things that I really wished had happened is that we would have built some names that, you know, were dependable and we're going to be on the roster and we're going to take this thing seriously. But getting hurt in a match kind of deters your ability to believe in yourself to win the next one in reality. So it kind of makes sense. But it would be cool if some of these individuals were able to see what we became. And that's why I'm excited about this project. Not that I would reach out to those guys and say to them, hey, this thing kept going, because some of them I don't have relationships with. And obviously as time goes on, 20 years, things I could potentially shoot them a message, but I don't know that would change anything. But it would have been cool. As I used to say to you when we talk about the RPG thing, I always wanted my newest role players to play off against my Jen and Randy and Grizzly and David. I would have loved to have done that. Just like I think it would have been really cool to bring the old TW or WG guys into TWF at the end and have them compete. And that would be kind of interesting and fun to even do something as simple, which would make sense since they don't know the magic, would be just to have a rumble so they could reappear. But the idea never crossed my mind. But that would be the only thing I regret, because I had a lot of fun. Because to me, it wasn't, at that time, it wasn't about making a great match. It was about spending time with my friends, and I got to do so much of that. And I'm very thankful for that. And it's kind of my upbringing. I'm working with these guys, and my parents were taking good care of me, and I had a blast. I would I like to say that I wish I was still friends with them? Sure. Who doesn't wish they had endless amounts of friends? But that's not how life works, unfortunately. And we kind of deal with cards that were dealt, and that's the way it played out. So would I like an epic event like that? Sure. Would it have been cool to have the Terminator come back or something? Sure. Would it have been cool to have Nuke Ultima get his butt destroyed by Bugman? Sure. Would it be cool to have the droid back? Sure. But whenever we enter the world of what if, there's so much we could do. What if big time Malcolm Fine took on the Terminator? Who knows?
Well, big time probably would have got choked out pretty quick. Yeah. But I do want to say, as someone who wasn't there, I do want to raise my glass here, thermos, in celebration of TWG, as I'm going to call it from now on, but TWA.
The wrestling group.
Laying the groundwork and for what would become the best time of my life, for helping create my best buddy, who I'm pointing the monitors over here, but one of my best friend, who made him into the strong opponent that he would be for me going forward. And of course, most importantly, thank Christ for Scott Black for teaching you that it was fake, because I wouldn't have lasted in a real era. I don't need you kneeing me in the gut because I metagamed back in the day. Goddamn.
And you sure as hell don't want to get in the ring with a flying Hawaiian. Just ask Black Ice.
All right. Well, folks, thanks so much for joining us on Inside the Titan Studios. A big talk on back in the day with TWA. And thanks so much for joining us on the channel. Next month, we're in the march towards the end, getting some fun Easter eggs. We're going to be back with some Inside the Titan Studios as well, so look forward to that. Damian, as always, thank you so much for joining us and talking about this time period in your life.
Just wanted to say before we close out, audience, really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to Malcolm and I reminisce about the good old days. I still think the golden era was the best era. But I want to say this in closing, is that these events that you're seeing are popping up in a different playlist, because at that time they weren't really in sequence with the free previews. But I know Snow Brawl 99 just dropped, but on the VHS tape it says Snow Brawl 98. Shows you how good I am at remembering years, because that was actually filmed in 99. And then you'll see TWF or TWA Out in the Cold. And then the rare gem that's also coming is TWA/TWF Snow Day Buried Alive. That one's coming. And then the last house show with the epic food fight, which is a huge Easter egg and gem for everyone to watch. That one is also on the way, and that is TWF Legends of the Ring house show. And then we go into when TWF was brought back in the non-canon 2 events. But because of the way those events were filmed, I've compacted them into one event that we aptly named TWF In Your Low-Income House. Malcolm and I agree that this is non-canon, but you would not see the brilliant commentary of Turk Doodley. You would not see Baby Mischief. You would not see the beginnings of Rin Chang. You would not see Havoc go totally insane if you did not see this event. And I am happy to be bringing that one to you. And again, Malcolm, thank you so much for making us do this. This is so important to get it out there to the wrestlers and to the public so they can see it. And I don't care what anyone says. I'm very proud that I was a yard tard. I'm very proud that I went pro. I'm not so proud of how my career ended, but I didn't really get to do anything in the pros that I wanted to, but hey, How many people can say I went to wrestling school and I became a wrestler? No offense to you, Malcolm, or the rest of the TWA, TWF roster, but just Phantom and me, guys. We're the only two that made it.
And folks, hit like, hit subscribe. Please leave a comment if you have any.
Yes, comment questions, because in the upcoming is Inside the Titan Studio prep for the end. And then after the end, Malcolm and I are going to sit down and we're going to have a great question from the first non-kayfabe chat, which was, if you could do it again, what would you have done differently? And also, we have a friend who's a podcaster, and those three over there do some great stuff on their podcast. When I post this video, I'll find the link so you guys can find that podcast. But Malcolm and I are going to be telling the story of the rise of TWA/TWF in Lyndonville, Vermont, being on television and telling our story on that podcast. And I think that's going to be fun. So I hope you guys tune into that. And we'll see you guys inside the next Inside the Titan Studio.
Later, guys. Thank you.
Bye-bye.